Randomised Gaming presents.
Hello and welcome to Superior Attack Volume 2. I am your host for this Randomised Gaming episode, Random Gamer Riven, and today we're going to take a comparison look at the arcade and Sega Saturn ports of Kyukyoku Tiger II. Don't quote my pronunciation on that. Or to quote the English name, Twin Cobra II. Although I must admit, Kyukyo, from what I've done my translation, stands for Ultimate Tiger II, or Finito, Final Tiger II. It's one of those words that I don't think we quite have a perfect translation for in English. But basically, I prefer the title Ultimate Tiger II. But for the benefit of the rest of this video, I'll be referring it to Twin Cobra II as, to save my pronunciation and your eardrums, I'm going to try avoid pronouncing Kyukyoku Tiger II. So this is a classic sort of arcade shooter. It is the third in the Tiger Heli series and also the final game. And the reason for that is Toaplan, who were developing it, actually went bust midway during development. And as a result, it was actually finished by Takumi. Now, all three of the Tiger Heli series arcade games were actually published by Taito. But as Taito had the license to the publishing rights, they were able to basically take up the Toaplan's work and give it to Takumi to finish. From my understanding, Cave Rising, so two big shooter names, and Takumi were all studios that were formed after the collapse of Toaplan, with many ex-Toaplan staff among them, basically. Hence why they all went into making shooting games from the minute they first opened their companies. Although it has to be fair to say, Takumi subsequently have petered off. Cave have also petered off, although they're releasing the odd game from time to time. Rising and 18, who sort of same group, have moved into doing some very different games and are going from strength to strength, including stuff like Marvel vs. Capcom 3 types they've done. Incidentally, you notice the first volume we actually called Inferior Attack, and the reason we're calling this one Superior Attack is this is a good comparison. We'll tweak the name of the title to give you an idea from superior to inferior as to whether it's going to be a good or a bad comparison video. So we're actually going to take a look at Ultimate Tiger II here, and this is the arcade versus the Saturn port. So we've actually got footage of the original Saturn game in action on a Sega Saturn. Unfortunately, we don't have a direct arcade PCB, but we'll be using MAME as the reference point for the arcade game. MAME is actually a fairly decent emulator and gives you a pretty good copy of the original PCB. And so it's a reasonably fair comparison. Sometimes you have to be a bit wary of comparison with emulators, as I'm going to show you later, because I'm actually going to compare the genuine Saturn footage versus the SFX emulator to see how they compare, because often you see a lot of comparison videos using emulators. And if you're using emulators, one, you've probably not got access to the original hardware and the original game, which means you may be displaying issues you're not aware of. Those type of comparisons are technically pointless if they're against non-original hardware, because you don't know any issues that are present in the emulators that aren't in the original hardware, and vice versa. There may be issues present in the original hardware that aren't present in the emulators. So I'm not going to say much more. I'm going to start with showing you the arcade version on the left, and on the right we're going to have the Sega Saturn version. Note, I'm going to be switching the audio. You'll see in the bottom I've got the little mic on, a sound on sign, the sound off sign. Basically we're going to swap audio so you can listen to it midway through. The reason being for this is that it's the best way to actually compare audio. We could do something trendy like split the channels, as I've seen other videos do, but that then makes it almost impossible to differentiate the sound quality different. Now we're going to start by, as this is the arcade version, the Sega Saturn version is actually quite an extensive port, hence why we're calling this Superior Attack, because it actually includes a couple of extra modes that aren't present in the original arcade version. In fact, it even features an extra level not present in the arcade version. But I'll show you that in a bit. And to begin with, we're going to basically be playing the arcade version versus the arcade mode from the Sega Saturn. And both of these are going to be in the original Tate view. That's 3x4 for the maximum comparison accuracy. Right, so that's enough of me talking for this first half. It's time to get the show on the road, and this is the arcade and Sega Saturn mode comparison. And to begin this comparison, eagle-eyed viewers should pay attention to the logo of the arcade version compared to the Saturn version. You will notice there's actually a burning effect in the arcade version, which is one of the few things missing in the Sega Saturn version. No idea why that's missing, maybe a RAM issue or something, but yep. The burning effect in the actual title logo, the name, is not present in the Saturn's version. And just coming up, we now have another change between the Saturn and Arcade version. You'll notice when the end of round score bonus pops up that the Saturn's version does not have the background banner that has the name of the game in it. The other, of course, expected difference between the two versions is that the Sega Saturn version does require to load in between each levels. It's a fairly quick load time and only takes about 10 to 15 seconds, so it doesn't impact enjoyment of the game at all. And it is fair to say this is actually one of the faster loaders for the shooter. It's not the fastest, but it's certainly not the slowest either. Dom Patch and Dodom Patch have particularly grim loading times, but none of the games are anywhere near as bad as something like the Dungeons and Dragons collection or Z on the Sega Saturn, which have horrendously long loading times. So that was the arcade and Saturn comparison of the first two stages in the game. And as you can see, they are very, very close. It's actually a really impressive conversion, the Saturn's one, as it maintains everything almost perfectly. Aside from the load times I mentioned and the few two minor graphical changes I managed to spot, that is literally it. There is some slight ad hoc loading as well in a few sections. Nice to be the last level. There's a teeny bit of load when basically the last stage is like you're going down a big base underground, and when you go down between after you defeat the sub-bosses, there's a teeny bit of load. Again, I think there's a teeny load in the end of stage 1 as you descend down into the clouds, but it's sort of ad hoc load. So basically the game appears to keep running, but it's slightly loading in the background. It just takes a bit longer to ascend, descend. It's nothing really major, and the game itself really does hold up well. This is actually a really impressive conversion, and I must admit, I take my hat off to Takumi, who've made a really good conversion of the arcade game here. And on top of that, they also added in a huge amount of extras in the Saturn only mode, which we are going to show next. Now, for the Saturn only mode, we're going to do a slightly different comparison, that we're going to compare the Sega Saturn version with the Saturn Emulator SSF. And we're going to see how close the emulator is to the real Saturn. And this time round, the level we'll be comparing is stage 3, and it will actually be from the arranged Sega Saturn exclusive mode.
コントロールよりアルファリーダーへ緊急事態です。現時刻までに制圧予定であったポイント W87 の敵湾岸施設ですが、敵軍の新型装甲車両ブリーディングピットの投入により、同ポイントに進行中であったベータチームの戦況は著しく不利です。直ちにポイントに向かいブリーディングピットを排除してください。目標破壊後はポイント P74 に戦術援助車両が向かっています。そちらに合流してください。以上、健闘を祈ります。
As you can see, that actually makes quite an interesting capture comparison. Just a quick note on the differences between the colours. That's because I captured MAME and SSF using Open Broadcast, and the Sega Saturn was captured with an Elgato Game Capture HD Pro, and there's some slight colour differential options in recording. I probably could have got a slightly closer match if I'd adjusted them a bit more. But in effect, both the games and the emulators use the same colours. So as you can see, SSF is close but no cigar is how I would put it. So you see the game speed is running a tad too fast, as is the loading cycle, hence why it loaded in the intro quicker and loaded out quicker as well. It also slightly sped through the level slightly faster. The clear indication of that is the warning indicator. They were both frame synced to start at the same point, but the warning point should both be at the same point. So it's an interesting watch there, I have to admit. The other major difference is the fact that SSF is not scaling the resolution correctly to 4:3. If you look at the picture size, the Saturn's version is slightly deeper at the top. As a result, SSF looks a bit squished. I mean, it's only slightly, but it does make it look a bit off. And it's quite interesting to see that, because SSF is supposed to be the best emulator going, and it's not quite even getting the aspect ratio of 4:3. Again, my attitude is you should always capture with source over emulator, due to the fact that you do get issues like that, where you could argue from a perspective, if you were playing the Sega Saturn's version, just playing by emulator, you could say the aspect ratio is a bit off the game, when in fact we know it isn't, but it's just the way the emulator's rendering it. Of course, it could slightly be my setup, but that was the closest setup I could get, spending quite a while tinkering with SSF to match the Saturn as closely as possible. So I think SSF does need some work, as does MAME in some degrees, because even MAME doesn't fully correctly emulate the original hardware exactly, because at this point in time, none of them seem to be capturing the safe areas correctly for the actual rendering. They all seem to be taking from the VDU RAM and not the final output, because like in the case of the Mega Drive, there are additional artifacts added in by the Mega Drive for processing in the final output that you don't see in the emulators. Audio-wise, again, that's a bit subjective. I always, again, prefer source audio. Typically, sound is the worst thing traditionally emulated. I even remember the SNES emulators long after they had the graphics working and everything. For even games like Star Ocean, the sound was always way, way off. In fact, in comparison, a lot of the emulators still are. When you play the original game next to the emulators, the sound sounds correct, but often it's a case of it's just not synced right, so it's playing at the wrong speed in effect. So it's fair to say the Saturn's port of, here we go again, Kyukyoku Tiger II is actually very impressive. Yes, it's expensive to buy like all the shooters are, but it's still a very good game. And in fact, it's incredibly close to the original arcade game. There's actually been quite an interesting comparison, seeing as fact there's so little documentation on Kyukyoku Tiger II or Twin Cobra II. Interestingly, one little tidbit I will show you is between the Western arcade release and the Japanese arcade release. As you would expect, there is some slight changes with the actual text graphics for the logos, but there is actually one change right at the start of the game. It's actually quite interesting, and it's purely based on the actual name change, I think preferably because of the groups that you play as. But pay attention, as you can see here. But if I just pop this up now, as you can see, to the left I have Kyukyoku Tiger II, the Japanese version in the arcade release. We have the helicopter appearing into the tiger. And in the right, because it's called Twin Cobra, they changed the picture for the Western release of a twin-headed snake. Now, I don't think the twin-headed snake graphic looks as good, but it's certainly a nice little interesting change between the two versions. Okay, that's it for this instalment of Superior Attack. We hope you've enjoyed it. And it's fair to say the Sega Saturn port of Twin Cobra II Plus is worthy of a Superior Attack award due to it being so close to the original arcade game. It's a fantastic port, and if you are fans of the shooting genre, well worth tracking it down. I know there'll be someone complaining about the price. Well, you're just going to have to pay it. No game is ever worth more than the original retail, but that's the way things are. It is a fantastic game, a fantastic shooter, and it's a fantastic port. Well worth purchasing if you're a fan of the genre. Thanks for watching. I am Random Gamer Riven, and if you enjoyed this content, please as always subscribe to the channel, like the video, or comment below. And if you want to see more Twin Cobra II on the Sega Saturn, we have two other videos on our channel already. I'll just put up the cards here. One is for a 1cc clear of the new Sega Saturn Arrange mode, and the other is a full playthrough on arcade mode.